go. Hello. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name?
My name is Mark Sargent, and I'm a flat earther.
Yeah, there it is. What was that ruckus? Thanks for calling, man. Our phones are not dialing out.
That's all right. And I got this text from you, and I'm dialing. I'm getting like numbers of people I have no idea, and then you say, "Oh, sorry, it's a typo." And it's like, okay.
Typo, yeah.
Yeah.
That double zero got me. That ruined everything. But we're so glad to have you on the air. Thanks for calling in, man.
Oh no, happy to be here.
How are things in Mark Sargent's world?
Things are going very well. I just finished the draft to my second book and sent it off to the publisher.
Wow.
And so I'm crossing my fingers that everything will go well, and we'll have it before the conferences in the fall. It is called, so the first one was called Flat Earth Clues, The Sky's the Limit. And this one is called, it's part of a trilogy. And this one's called Flat Earth Clues, End of the World.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is it the end of the world?
End of the world. Well, initially, it was started out as kind of a play on words, because just about everybody that attacks Flat Earth say, well, give me a picture of the edge of the world. Have you ever been to the edge, the end? Is there an end to to this thing? And but it was mostly because National Geographic, when we did the interview, were asking a lot of really weird, dark questions, which was, will Flat Earth usher in a new dark age? Is it possible that if enough people get involved in Flat Earth, that they'll attack science and everything will go backwards, and we'll go into the 1800s or whatever it is, or the New Crusades? And I'm thinking, well, probably
no running
not.
water and anything.
Yeah,
like that.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Yeah,
ooh, it's already happening now.
I like a little Bill Murray quote there. So
thank you.
What is beyond the ice wall?
Yeah,
when does it stop? When
does
it end?
I think it stops with a barrier. I think that was what Admiral Byrd and the United States Navy and the Soviets figured out in 1960, that there is some sort of, like anything, if you're really, really tiny inside a snow globe, eventually you will run into something. And whatever, what this dome is made out of, take your pick, high frequency, force field, unified field, heavy elements, heavy water, whatever it is, we can't punch through it. So,
okay.
But it's out there a ways. I mean, it is out there thousands of miles off the Antarctic coast. The most common misconception.
Has anyone been brave enough to go out and get a photograph of this?
Oh, sure.
Sure.
The United States Navy did in the late 1950s, and that's where everything went south.
You have access to that photo? Can you share that photo with our listening audience?
If I had access to that photo, I'd be on. The world wouldn't be what we know it now. It'd be completely different. Let me put it a different way. If the United States military was the one that took the photo, do you really think they're just going to hand it over to Time magazine? No.
Well, true.
No, they're going to be like, oh, you know what? Let's file this away. Remember that Indiana Jones thing where they put it in a crate and then put that crate in the middle of this huge warehouse full of crates? With the Ark of
That's where the photo is.
Yeah, that's where the photo is. With the Ark of the Covenant, basically.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and half of that guy's melted face.
Yeah. So we were.
So
go ahead.
1,000? Did you say thousands of miles
inland
to the edge of the?
Oh yeah. The Antarctic coastline would just be the beginning of the edge, meaning, and that's the most common misconception. I mean, the movie Thor with the whole Asgard cosmic waterfall thing, that did us no favors at all. Because it's like, okay, well, the edge of the world is obviously where the oceans just start endlessly flowing off the edge. And it's like, no. And the Antarctic coastline is where it begins, and then thousands of miles inland is where the barrier would be. And that's where I would put it if I was going to build it, because there's nothing out there in Antarctica. There's no animal life, no plant life, no indigenous population. The climate's horrible. In fact, most people don't even know that most of Antarctica sits at 14,000 feet. It's a huge plateau of ice, and altitude sickness kicks in at about half that, 7,000.
So, and it's getting small. It's getting smaller according to global warming or climate change.
I mean, and by the way, I actually believe in climate change. I mean, it used to be called global warming, but I believe in it because in the flat Earth model, isn't it easier to understand greenhouse gases if it's actually a greenhouse? With a physical structure. Just saying.
Mm-hmm. You hear that?
Just saying. See.
So the last time we talked, we said we would cover the Elon Musk SpaceX stuff.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You have a lot of dirt.
Oh yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
Musk.
I dedicated almost an entire chapter to him in the book. One of the chapters I have, in fact, here, let me rattle off just for you guys, almost an exclusive anyway.
Ooh.
Here's the chapter list for the book.
Wait,
Ready?
this is an exclusive?
Yeah. You ready?
Wait, hang on. Do I have the exclusive thing, Todd, or do you have it? I don't have it. Darn it.
What is the exclusive? Oh, you mean like a da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, like a
Yeah, we have a thing. We have a thing, but
we have a
it's
thing.
the station's falling apart.
Well, you could always play.
There we go.
Perfect.
Yeah,
It's a KUHS exclusive.
Thanks, Jason. That was perfect.
What did
Go
you
ahead.
did you used to work for Fox News? Because it's like straight out of what they do like every 15
That
minutes.
is close, isn't it?
It's like,
Some
alert!
sources say that's true.
Tom Cruise not disclosing how tall he really is. You know.
Some sources say you have to always,
Yeah,
preface
sources
it with
say.
that or after.
So okay, so the book title is called Flat Earth Clues Into the World, and the chapters are ready. Here we go. Chapter 1, Look Away. Chapter 2, How We Got Here. Chapter 3, Experiments, Test, Observe, Repeat. Chapter 4, The Questions. Chapter 5, there's only 13 of them. How NASA Failed. Chapter 6 is Word on the Street. It's basically a gossip column. No, Chapter 7 is Behind the Curve, goes over the documentary. Chapter 8 is Subject Matter Experts. Chapter 9 is Friends of the Family. Chapter 10, which we'll get into in a second, is Elon Musk, Enemies of the State. Basically, everybody on the outside that really hates Flat Earth and actively goes out against this. 11, Religion and Why Flat Earth Matters to You. 12, The Flat Earth Problem. And 13, End of the World. So, Elon
Okay.
Musk.
I like it. Quick question.
Yeah.
This is very important.
Yeah.
Are we in the book?
The radio station?
Yeah, are we
Well,
in the book?
no,
You know,
not
me,
really.
Aaron,
I mean,
Aaron, Todd, and Jason, are we in the book?
Well, no, but I like you guys a lot. I mean,
Dang
it's
it.
nice. But
Okay, go ahead.
No, I
Sorry.
mean, had I known you longer, I think you would eventually gotten in there. But these were people. Most of the people, like in Friends of the Family, were people I had been hanging out with since about 2015 when this thing started.
Okay.
So, but no offense to you guys. I mean, you know what? If in the trilogy, I'll tell you what. If I actually make it to the third book and I get to publish it and everything, then I absolutely will include you in the third book.
Excellent.
All right. So you will be in Return of the Jedi. All right. So
That's
What about
good.
all the conspiracy theorists that are going to have a problem with you just having 13 chapters?
Ooh.
oh yeah, I know. I did that deliberately. And
Oh,
that's
you
just
did.
kind of a little
you?
nod to the conspiracy. I mean, I suppose I could have gone for broke and made like 33 chapters, but no. I mean, 13 is just fine, and that's it's just, and seriously, it's done because it's a conspiracy book. And
Okay.
that's, I mean, but I had to like avoid, like for example, the very first chapter, Look Away, and I had to hire an illustrator for this. Initially, I was going to have him have a guy peeking out underneath a blindfold. However, that's way too Masonic because Masons use blindfolds, and there's also that whole one eye, the all-seeing eye.
The all-seeing eye.
And so now it's just going to be a man in a blindfold, and it's like, okay, because that'll work just fine. Anyway, back to Elon Musk, who is
Here we go.
by far
Mr. Tesla.
Oh, Mr. Tesla.
Mr.
Okay.
PayPal.
First off, Elon Musk has almost nothing to do with the companies that he's in now. He made. You have asked the average person on the street. They'll say, you ask them who started Tesla, and they'll say, "Oh, Elon Musk did." No. Elon Musk he bought Tesla. That's all he did. It'd be like saying, "Did Mark Cuban invent the Dallas Mavericks?" No, he did not. He just purchased them outright.
He didn't?
It's funny. Well, I mean, Dallas is a fairly new team by comparison, but no, he came in and just bought them and then sat in the stands and yelled at refs. But Elon Musk, he bought Tesla and took over the stuff, and then he started up SpaceX. He's not an engineer. He's not, he's about as much into SpaceX as Bill Nye would be into SpaceX. He just the government.
He's the money guy.
The what? Yeah, he's just a money
the
guy.
money guy.
He made
He's like Bezos.
He's a developer. That's all he did. He helped program the program which we all know as PayPal, and he of course got in on the ground floor before it went public. And so I think he had somewhere upwards of like 10% of the entire stock of it when that thing went public, and of course he became a billionaire almost immediately because PayPal is like the bank to bank transaction thing for the common man. So
what's the deal with Elon Musk?
So here's the deal. Elon Musk was basically off our radar for quite a while. Yes, he made all sorts of weird promises before he sent the Roadster into space. He said, but just in fact, there was a great headline in the New York Post. You can look it up. It says Elon Musk is a total fraud, and I had been saying that for at least a year. And finally, they wrote this, and they said he's never followed through with anything he's ever done. He said he was going to make a super plane that was going to go from the United States to China in 2 hours and cost as much as a business class ticket. He said he was going to make an underground high-speed rail system from Los Angeles to San Francisco. It never even started. He's going to solve the Puerto Rico hurricane power problems with some solar arrays with some help of the government. He never even started. He's going to save those kids in the cave, that soccer team, with his submarine. Never did that, and then accused everyone of doing it wrong. But the thing that really caught my eye was in 2017 when in the beginning of 2017, he says, oh yeah, I'm going to send 2 tourists around the moon and back by the middle of 2018. And I was like, whoa, that is one aggressive timeline, considering you don't have a rocket, you don't have a capsule, you don't even have the people, you don't have pilots, you have nothing, and you're going to do this in 15, 18 months? It's like,
lofty ambition.
Lofty. It was ridiculously aggressive.
In his defense, he's a dreamer. And by the way, that article that Elon Musk is a total fraud came out in the New York Post.
What did I say, New York Times?
Not the New York Times.
Oh, I'm sorry, New York Post.
Fake news.
Fake news, yeah. Fake news. Okay, so that was the first thing that caught my eye. And then all of a sudden, I got an email from somebody showing I just woke up one morning and somebody had sent me a snapshot of the Roadster in space, and I was groggy as I get up. It's like, oh, what's this BS? And I'm looking at it, I'm going, well, there's no way this is. I go to Jaron, who photoshopped this? This is pretty good, And then somebody said, no, dude, that's a live link. And I go, live to what? It's like a live broadcast. There's supposedly a Tesla in space right now. I'm going, get the hell out of here. So we break this thing down, and oh my Lord, we tore this thing apart in about 5 hours. And to start, ready? Okay, so why? And here's why it was absolutely impossible. It's basically the impossible car. First off, they said this was his car from his garage. He even admitted on camera, he said, I made no modifications. I just put it on top of a capsule and I sent it off into space, put it up in orbit. On the way to Mars, it was going to circle the Earth a few times and then go off on its way to Mars. And he shot it up there, supposedly, and we'll get to that in a second. I don't know how much time we have, but he shot it up on a Falcon, what's called the Falcon Heavy, a Falcon Heavy main rocket with some booster rockets on the side, and put a big capsule on the top of it that opened up, that cracked open and supposedly showed.
Yeah, I know. I watched the whole thing live. It was incredible.
It was incredible, absolutely incredible. And that's what it is. It's incredible. There's no way from the laws of physics, this thing should have ever done what it did. And I'll explain in a second. So first off, while I'm watching this thing, I'm seeing no degradation of anything that's happening. First off, if this thing was exposed to the vacuum of space, every pressurized system in there would have exploded immediately. Starting from, the transmission fluid, the water washer fluid, the brake fluid, the transmission fluid. Remember, it's an electric car, so there's no oil or anything like that, so no gasoline. The 4 tires on it would have immediately blown up as tight as a drum and then detonated and just wrecked the fiberglass. The windshields, not just the front but the side ones, if you've ever seen anyone on a cold day put some dumbass that throws like hot water, warm water on a windshield and it cracks.
How do we explain the tires though on the Mars rover?
Well, the Mars rover tires are supposedly metal. So, and then the same thing with the moon rover. If you believe it, it's like a mesh titanium metal, which I don't buy for a second. Anyway, so aside from those things, right? So the side windshields should have spiderwebbed. The front windshield should have been destroyed. What else? The dash.
But why would it have been destroyed if it wasn't pressurized? So in other words, if something's pressurized, then it needs to
So the difference
it needs
between
to push back on the pressure. But if it's not pressurized, then it's just going to accept the vacuum.
Everything's pressurized, though. Everything in a car. I mean, they would have had to. If he says there's no modifications to the car, then every system which is enclosed. I mean, the battery acid. Think of all the battery on this thing. Remember, it's an electric car. The battery acid alone.
Maybe he took all that stuff out.
Nah, he said he didn't make a damn change to it. Not a one. And it would have taken a solid month to prep this car for space. And he said it never ever happened. But okay, so let's say it was just a flaw on his part in his speech where he didn't, it was like, I made a mistake, and actually they prepped the hell out of it. Fine.
Sure.
All right, if that's the case, then let's look at the other obvious things that were, the things that were missing. How about this? There were no logos on this car at all, and you can go back and look. Remember, we're talking about a public company and a private company, Tesla and SpaceX, right? One's public, one's private, and this thing should have been decorated like NASCAR. It should have been wall-to-wall endorsements. The whole side of that car should have said SpaceX. The whole front should have been like a giant Trans Am. It should have said Tesla. I mean, there shouldn't have been anything but logos. This is an advertising gold mine, right? And not to mention, why are you sending the freaking convertible up there? Why not send your flagship, the four-door S-Series, the sedan, 4 seats? Instead of that, even the mannequin didn't have a single
It's an interesting argument that you're making, but I don't see the importance of having logos all over the car.
Well, you can't. It's America. We live for
off?
marketing stuff. I mean, every corporation would have killed to do marketing for this thing. I mean, think of this. He could have sold.
But I believe his goal was to expand his brand.
Yeah.
Not,
fine.
not
Expand his
tied.
brand. Where's his logo? Why take the Tesla logo off the car? Why pull they were trying to fake space on the cheap. That's all they were trying to do here, which is, can we convince the public? We watch social media in real time and we say, okay, how far can we take this? And all of a sudden you start reading things like, oh, hashtag, is this real? Hashtag, not buying it. Hashtag, fake. You see enough of those, like, oh, okay, we got to pull these things back. I mean, think about it. If he could have done cross marketing, he could have put, instead of that stupid generic mannequin, why didn't mannequin have any logos on it? You could have replaced it with, let's just do Disney for the whole thing. A Stormtrooper, Boba Fett, Iron Man, and Groot in the back. That thing would have paid for itself. I
don't think he was worried about paying for it. I don't think that was the issue.
Really? A billionaire does not care about money? Come on, man.
Well, you make an interesting argument, man, but I do think that, I think his whole goal was to just promote the brand.
He wasn't promoting. That was just it. Okay, I got one more for you. Fine, he was just promoting the brand, even though he wasn't. There was no. Okay, if he was promoting the brand, and Patricia Steer figured this one out. I was really proud of her for doing this. She goes, hey, after it was over, why weren't there car commercials running on this? She goes, why wasn't there a banner in every Tesla dealership showing this image, this profile shot of the Roadster in space? There are car companies that would have lied, cheated, and killed for this sort of advertising dollar.
There are no Tesla dealerships. You order it online. Period.
No, there's Tesla dealerships. Okay, fine.
It was all over their website. So
of course, it had to be on the website for a short time, of course. But
I love you, Mark, but I got to push back on this one a little bit. I have to push back a little bit. I just can't see. I don't see the validity in your argument that there were no logos on there and there were no pictures of it in a dealership.
Well, because you, as a corporation, would know. There are marketing people that would have jumped all over each other to try to maximize this thing from a marketing standpoint. Fine. If you don't like the marketing thing, I got one more for you. Ready? It's the ultimate misdirection, and that was the booster rockets themselves. First off, so you had the Falcon Heavy with the car on top, and you had these little booster rocket things on the side. Mm-hmm. And they supposedly, and if you watched it drop off, these 2 booster rockets define everything that we know as engineering. These 2 booster rockets fall back after launching with some fuel let and go all the way back down to Cape Canaveral in Florida and land right next to each other, side by side, at the exact same time, using some sort of pulse detonation rocket technology, which we don't have.
3 times now, right?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's
awesome.
Yeah,
you've seen it on TV, right? Yeah, it doesn't exist outside of, what was that movie? Battle for Los Angeles. That's where they stole the idea from. It's like, okay, you drop it at free fall speed and less than a mile up, you kick in these pulse detonation rocket engines, and you land them right next to each other. Okay, first off, from a safety concern, no aircraft ever land right next to each other. But the reason they did it is because they had to let the public is, I'm not going to say they're dumb, but they are simple in that regards. And that is, if we don't land them right next to each other, the people aren't going to know which rocket is which, unless we have a big number 1 on one side and a number 2 on the other side. So let's land them literally side by side.
Land them like 1,000 miles away from each other or something like that?
No, they should have been. They should have landed. First off, shouldn't have been landed at the same time. They should have had one drop down and then another one drop down, 5 minutes later or 3 minutes later. They literally touched down within, 2 seconds of each other, right next to each other. Even helicopters don't land right next to each other. Even in times of war, they space themselves out. Oh God! But that was in the misdirection.
You're getting worked up. But you don't think that you don't think our technology is advanced enough to where they could actually sort of
No.
And I've seen it again. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And they don't land exactly at the same time, and they don't land at exactly the same spot they took off. There's a slight variation. So
they landed in the same frame on the same pads. And oh yeah, by the way, why is NASA? Why did they land? Sorry, I got to interrupt. Why did they land at Kennedy? They are a direct competition to NASA. NASA gets $54 billion a year to keep these guys out. Why are they being allowed? Why is SpaceX landing in Kennedy launch pads? In fact, not only are they landing there, they had SpaceX logos painted on the Kennedy ground. When does this happen? But here, no, that's not even the misdirection. The misdirection is, so you're following the boosters. I got to tell you, from a production standpoint, even I missed it for like 3 or 4 hours, which is, okay, you're following the rockets. They're going, this is amazing. These two rockets are going to, land side by side right next to each other after launching this thing in space. And then all of a sudden we cut to profile of car. There it is in front of the Earth. Well, that's a problem, because what happened to the Falcon Heavy? Get him there. The booster rockets, that's not what put the car up there. It was a giant rocket called the Falcon Heavy with a big capsule on the top. And that thing slowly cracked open like an egg and released the car. Well, when that happens, like we saw with Apollo or all the other stuff, that giant rocket should have been tumbling backwards slowly towards Earth. They had 3 cameras on that car, one in the front, one on the side, and one in the rear. And that thing spinning, that rocket would have been easily visible, and there was no sign of it anywhere. It was gone. It was like the Falcon Heavy never even existed, and everybody missed it. And that's because from a production standpoint, it was brilliant, which was, let's show the boosters, perfect touchdown, go to car, don't even mention the Falcon Heavy, and the general public just never even saw it. It's brilliant. Watch it yourself. There is no Falcon Heavy. The Falcon Heavy just vanished. The biggest.
You know what though, Mark?
Yeah.
You're going to have an opportunity to do this with Bezos here pretty soon.
Mr. Sargent.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Sarge.
I'm messing with Todd. I told him to call you Mr. Sargent.
Oh no, it's okay.
You
can call me whatever you want.
Yeah, because Musk, if you've noticed lately, he's kind of out of the news.
Well, he's got nothing left.
For the most part,
there's nothing left. And by the way, but let me throw one more thing, which just infuriated us when he did that press conference after the Tesla was in space. And by the way, why'd you cut the feed when you were supposedly leaving Earth's orbit to go to Mars? You had perfect HD broadcast footage, and as it's heading towards Mars, not even heading, it's still in Earth orbit. It's like, oh, we ran out of battery power. That's it. Good night, everybody. Roll credits. It's like, what are you talking about? What? It didn't go snowy at all? No. When Elon was on the ground, his quote, which was absolutely priceless, and I should have put that in the book. He says, it's real because it looks so fake. That's literally verbatim. And it's like, and I listen to this. I'm going, you should never ever allow this man to be put in front of a camera or make quotes like that. It is just embarrassingly bad. No, he is a freaking. By the way, sorry. What happened to the 2 tourists that were supposed to go around the moon and back in 2018? Never happened. It's the middle of 2019. The rocket was never built. The capsule was never built. The project was never started. And then I think it was like 3 months ago, he said, well, no. In a couple of years, I'm going to send this Japanese guy and 12 people around the moon and back. It's like, 12? What vehicle are you using for this? We don't even have a shuttle that can supposedly do that.
All right. This is fascinating, and I think this is a longer conversation.
Sorry.
and I wish we'd have gotten you on the phone a little bit earlier. We are running out of time.
That's okay. That's all right. No, I'm glad I caught you guys.
From 9 to 11 Central Standard Time.
Okay.
And it is almost 11. So I got to get out of here. But the next show coming up on KUHS 102.5 FM is Radiopedia. And, Mark, if you'd like to stay on the line, I will guarantee that Brian Caldwell will talk to you for an hour. Because he's super into this kind of stuff, and he does radio shows about this all the time. He's sort of like he's our Art Bell. He really is.
Oh, okay.
I make no joke
I don't know if I can talk for an hour, but I can talk to him for a little bit. Sure.
Ooh, okay.
I think you can talk for an hour, bro.
Hey, Brian.
Well, no. Meaning I don't have time. I don't have an hour to kill.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Oh, okay.
Come in for a second, Brian. Brian's coming in. I know we're going a little long. Brian, and I'm sorry, but Mark Sargent will talk with you. We'll leave the phone up, and then you can just start talking with him, and I'll get out of your way. It's your show.
Oh, okay.
If you want to. It's Mark Sargent. It's the guy from the movie. You know
he doesn't have to talk to me.
So what's your topic tonight, fairies?
No, it was Betty and Barney Hill.
Okay, see, good enough.
He's going to talk about Benny and Barney Hill tonight.
Alien abductions. It's perfect for
Perfect,
this.
yes, it is.
Well, it's
Mark,
a little older.
Snow globe.
Mark, I love you, buddy. Thank you for calling the show.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, guys.
let's chat next week. I'm gonna wrap our show up. You stay on the line, okay?
Okay, I'll stay on the line.
Don't go anywhere. And if Brian wants to chat with you, he'll pick up the conversation.
Okay.
If he doesn't, then let it go.
Okay.
It's good for our station, no matter how you look at it.
No,
It's
that's
awesome.
fine. That's fine.
All right, man.
Thanks.
Take care, Mark. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, bye. It's the
All right.
record you need to know about. We'll see you next week, everybody. KUHS 102.5 FM.
All right, we're done with that. Record you need to know about, they just left the building. Mark, are you still there?
I am still here.
Hey, Mark Sargent, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing okay. So let's go ahead and start this. You were talking about your book and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So-
I've got a new book coming out in the fall. I just finished the draft on it. It is a sequel to Flat Earth Clues, The Sky's the Limit, which was turned into a video series, and then eventually a documentary that just got out on Netflix a few months back called Behind the Curve. Which followed the entire Flat Earth, well, a big chunk of the Flat Earth community through 2017. It was a lot of fun to shoot. But this book is called Flat Earth Clues, End of the World, which goes into a lot of heavier questions, which is, there's a lot of scientists now that are coming at us and saying, is it possible that if enough people, if Flat Earth gets any bigger, is it possible, we'll start burning down libraries and, lynching scientists and stuff like that. And I, of course, it's no, that wouldn't. We've done hundreds of regional meetups and conferences in more countries than I can count, and we haven't had a single incident. I mean, it's been really, really peaceful. So, but I understand like how National Geographic was worried because they're a science-based network, no different than the Discovery Channel or the History Channel. Or some of those. So anyway, yeah, that's what I'm currently working on. And we're just.
Well, I think the argument was that, like what we do with vaccines.
Yeah.
This is a better question. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What exactly would happen if the world found out that it was actually flat? How would that change everybody's life?
That's a good question because at least 1 out of 10 people ask me, it's like, well, my wife doesn't listen to me and my kids hate me and I have to go to my stupid job in the morning. What would change if we found out that Flat Earth was a reality tomorrow? And I said, well, it may not affect you immediately in the next 24 hours, but over the next weeks and months, it absolutely would. And here's why. It's a three-pronged thing. I mean, it affects everything that we know. First off would be academic, which is think of like overnight in every university that you can think of, state and international. Astronomy and astrophysics would shut down. They would close their doors. They couldn't reopen until they figured out what the hell it meant. And then the remaining physical sciences like, geology, hydrology, biology, take your pick. They would all have to retool from the ground up. I mean,
But isn't that part of science, though, is that the goal of it is to figure out the world and you change with the evidence. So if it was presented to them and there was evidence, would they not change with it like they have with almost everything else?
People protect their own interests. I mean, scientific institutions aren't that much different from corporations. And in that, I mean, would you shoot your own foot if it meant, the truth would get out? Or shotgun yourself in the leg in this case? Not to pick on some of the conspiracies of the past, but the cigarette companies, the lawyer rule still apply, which is they apply for everything, which is you deny, even if you're guilty, you deny until they absolutely positively have you. Until then, you protect your interests. Not to go off on the vaccination thing, but look, Big Pharma has a vested interest in keeping this going for as long as they can. And we all know the old sayings: "There's no money in the cure. There's money in the treatment." So, I'm sorry.
Well, there's actually more money in boner pills than anything else.
Well, yes, that's that. And by the way, how's that for an accident? That was a blood pressure medicine which went horribly wrong.
Well, it didn't go horribly wrong. That's kind of what happened.
Well, no, I mean, it was like
different.
I mean, it was terrible as a blood pressure medicine, but at the same time, it was like, oh yeah, there's this weird side effect that seems to be pretty much consistent across the board, and they sold the hell out of it. which was great. They just rebranded it, which is awesome. Sorry. So that's academic. Economically, you're talking about something that could shake up world markets. You'd have to suspend world trading for several months to figure out what it all means. I mean,
would you? I don't think
really?
that would actually
if
happen.
If Donald Trump got pneumonia tomorrow, the market would respond.
They'd respond, but they wouldn't stop.
No, they wouldn't stop. But that's my point. That's just one guy. If the stock markets rise and fall on the stupidest things, and of course, I don't even believe that we even get most of it. I think it's insider trading anyway. But world markets, you would have to.
That's a different thing, but yeah. And the market really doesn't have stock market really doesn't have a lot to do with the economy. They're kind of two different things.
Well, come on.
Go on.
If when the stock market tanked back in 2007, 2008, I know because I was in the hiring sector at that point. Everybody froze. Nobody hired. Our business was in staffing, and we lost 75% of our revenue stream in the first 6 months. And
well, if you look at certain, 2002. The majority of newspapers put on hiring freezes and wage freezes. I mean, and they weren't nearly as bad as they are now. I mean, companies tend to do stuff like that.
Well, I'm saying our company collapsed because of it, and a lot of our rivals collapsed. The point is that
but a lot didn't.
If the what?
But McDonald's didn't have it.
Well, no, but that's different.
Walmart
McDonald's caters to a whole nother. You're right. McDonald's didn't, and dollar stores didn't. And Walmart didn't, but there's a lot of corporations that really took a beating during that whole thing. I mean, not to mention, I don't know, who's the big bank? I can't even remember who they were. The big banking house that was sacrificed at the end.
Goldman Sachs? Who are you talking
No,
about?
no. Goldman Sachs came out
Bear
fine.
Stearns? What are you?
Well, the point is they're one of the biggest banks in the world. The one been around before the Civil War. They were the sacrificial lamb in this case. Nobody was willing to merge or buy them out. And it's like, oh, sorry, 160 years of, great revenue gone in a winter. But anyway, not the point. The point is that world markets would react if all of a sudden you told the entire world, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, it's not a globe anymore. It's a snow globe, whatever version of planetarium, terrarium, whatever you want to call it. It would react, and it would react violently because no one would know. Everyone was like, okay, what do these industries mean? What does it all mean? Like, for example, and I said this in the book, which was, do you still commit all the same atrocities you did before if all of a sudden you're literally one big family, that there's nowhere to go? This is the only game in town. This is the only boat, and you're all on it. Do you still go and do territorial wars over this, or does it change the dynamics? The point here is that economics.
I think everything would still be wars and everything else.
Yeah, but would it be the same?
If there's a majority of people who, for example, like yourself and others, David Weiss, whomever.
Yeah.
And by the way, why are you and David? You need to call David Weiss.
Well, you
guys have to work this out.
You lost me. David Weiss is a friend. Why? I talk to him every other day.
That's not what I've been hearing, my friend. I think you need to call me. You guys need to work this out. Whatever this is between you guys is none of my business.
David, are you talking about the same guy?
Yeah, from the rabbit hole.
Deep inside the rabbit hole, David Weiss?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He helped design my banner. I use his slides every single week. I've never had a disparaging word with David.
See, that makes me sad.
What?
But anyway.
No, don't you don't get off that easy. Why are you saying that David and I have a rift between us?
It just seems that way. It just seems that way to me. I may be wrong.
And you're absolutely wrong. Wait, why would you even come? Where does this even come from? Exactly.
I don't know. It just when
do you not like David?
It looks like you're kind of taking shots at each other. I'm just saying.
I don't know if you're trying
like
to create
some
sort of rivalry between the two of us, but
a little rivalry thing going on.
We've never, seriously, I've gone to I don't know how many events with a guy, but we've never had a bad thing to say about you. If somebody and you would be the first to tell me this, I get emails from people all day long. Not sure where. No, I've got nothing. I've never had a bad thing to say about David ever. In fact, I was so proud of him just a couple of weeks ago because he's the guy that got Owen Benjamin, the comedian, to show up at our thing that's coming up in Dallas.
That's a big get, Owen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. So Pat, let's go beyond the world market stuff because we'll agree to disagree here. I think it would be a massive massive.
Well, no, my point is that real quick, just one last question, and then we'll move on. my point is that right now there's a preponderance of evidence from people who believe it, scientists and normal people, that the world is not flat.
Right.
It's circular shaped. Not completely, but in that way.
You mean globe?
And yet, despite all of the evidence that people put out, there are people like you who would deny it.
Yeah.
So if you proved it, how would people still not deny it? They've been trained forever to believe that the world is round.
Because I started out
so
as one of those.
So it wouldn't really change.
By the way, we don't even use the word round because it's not three-dimensional. Globe, ball, sphere. If you want to say round, that's fine. But your dinner plate is round, your hubcap is round, dining room table is round, unless it's a square dining room table.
We don't really want to get into semantics here.
Well, yeah, actually we do.
Oh, okay.
So
we'll remember that for in the future. So go ahead.
Okay, so because I have no problem with that, because everybody in the flat earth community started out as a globalist, for lack of a better term. We all started out I hated flat earth when I started. I hammered on this thing for 9 months at least. And finally I just gave up. Like a lot of people, it's like, everyone's got that breaking point. I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people, unless they get stuck in the denial and anger phase. And I say, all right, I put it out to the hive mind. I said, look, here's why I think I can't prove the globe in a court of law anymore. That's what we're talking about here. Can I prove to you right now that the earth is flat? No, of course not. If I could, I'd be super famous. But I can create so much reasonable doubt in the globe that the only place you have left to turn is some sort of flat model. And if you say, well, reasonable doubt isn't enough, I was like, well, it is in court pretty much every day of the year. So, but those people,
but that's defined if someone's guilty or not. That's not,
people go to jail all the time on reasonable doubt, and they get acquitted on reasonable doubt too.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
So, there's several different. You've been in several different documentaries and news reports.
Yeah.
There's a famous one to where there was this experiment to where a professor, from University of California, one of those interconnected colleges.
Yeah.
He did an experiment to where he took a little boat and put on there a sign that had 3 different markers on there.
Yep. I was there. By the way, he's not a professor. He was just a guy from a skeptics group. His name is James Jim Underdown. And he was there as part of the skeptics group, and National Geographic shot the whole thing. And people and National Geographic gave no details on that, and I thought it was really interesting that you could see the far shoreline from twice that distance, and yet they were saying, well, obviously you can see the stripes disappearing. Was the most unscientific thing I've ever seen. And on top of it, they got rid of the main test. That was their backup test. The main test was 10 miles away on the other side of the lake on the Salton Sea off of Los Angeles, where they had these balloons, and they were going to raise them up at a certain level, and they say, okay, you can't see them until we get there. And we were shooting footage, and we were shooting at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and the thing was they couldn't figure out where to look because there was no distinguishing landmarks out there in the desert. And they were saying, well, we can't find it. We found it with our P900s. And we said, oh, yeah, we can find it. They're going, no, you can't see it. It's like, why in the world what are we even talking about here? We can see this. And National Geographic filmed the whole thing, and they completely edited it out. It's like the experiment never even happened. We shot we have hours and hours and hours of footage on YouTube. And Nat Geo just cut the whole thing out. So, no.
But my question going from that is, if you have, I don't know, it looked like, at least from that,
yes,
that you were not accepting the evidence when you said you would if this experiment worked out.
Yeah.
So what can someone do to prove to you that the Earth is not flat?
Perfect.
What would it take?
That's good. I get this. In fact, your station asked me this a couple of months ago, which was, okay, there's 2 things. One costs a little bit of money, and the other one doesn't. And it's like, no. And I know that the guys say, oh yeah, we can put you up on a rocket in SpaceX. Like, yeah, good luck. But I'd totally do it if somebody could swing it. But there's 2 things you could do. One would be to put a 4K camera on the side of a rocket, face it down towards the Earth, and just launch it and not turn it off, no edits, just let the footage run, and eventually, and send this thing out of the orbit. And eventually you would see the Earth slowly but surely turn into a ball like you would expect, and, go, fade away into this little distance thing. And you keep the footage, shooting for as long as you can. That has never been done in the history of space travel, which, again, I think is amazing. They always drop it off by like stage 1 or stage 2. No footage has ever been done to that regards. That'd be the first thing. 4K footage, just keep the camera running. Do not edit it. Let us take a look at it, and I'd quit Flat Earth tomorrow. But there's another test I can do on the ground that requires none of that, and that is the spacesuit test, the spacesuit challenge, which I put out there, which is because the spacesuit, the astronaut suits that we see absolutely violate the laws of thermodynamics, which is pressure needs a container. Plain and simple. It's like, well, no, the suit has a container. And it's like, no. The power of a vacuum on the outside of the suit should turn the inside pressure of that suit into a parade float. It should turn into a basketball. It should be instant. It should be violent. The suit would never be able to hold up. It should burst, and the astronaut should die. And it is the finest example of not even misdirection, just creative editing that I've ever seen. And that is when the early spacesuits were built, they were built with plastics and metals, and they realized they looked like B-movie robots. I mean, they were clunky. And they did this because, well, the pressure of a vacuum. You can't have a soft container. You can't have a soft, flexible thing. And then somebody came up with it. It was brilliant idea. And that is the average American doesn't know physics. They don't know any thermodynamics. So it's like, let's just shoot with a fabric suit. We'll just shoot it. Everyone will be running around, pretend like nothing's strange, and no one will have any doubts about it. And every once in a while, someone will say, well, it's because of the layers. No, it's special layers. I'm going, no. My winter coat has layers. All it does is protect you from the cold. Layers would immediately pancake, and it would still turn into a basketball. Technically, a basketball has 3 or 4 layers. No, a spacesuit would never, ever do it. They would have no articulation points. They would not be able to bend anything. If they moved, they'd be fighting the shape of that suit at all times. On top of that, even if you could convince me that there's something in the backpacks of what we have now with microprocessor technology that somehow counteracts the vacuum of space, because I don't care about the oxygen or heating or cooling, I just care about the vacuum. Tell me how they did it with analog technology back in 1969. How did they do it? And nobody ever even complained. When find me footage where someone's saying, oh yeah, we only got 20 minutes of air left, or anything to that regard. They just went out and did it. They wouldn't have been able to use their hands. Their hands might as well have been oven mitts. And they would have never been able to manipulate complex electronics. I don't even want to get into the other problems with Apollo, from the satellite dish to the 10,000 foot-pounds of thrust that didn't create a splay pattern, the shadows that are intersecting, no feats of strength. Oh, it just goes on and on. It's maddening. Sorry, I ramble. It's what I do.
No, that's fine. This is kind of interesting. So, have you actually visited any of how much have you studied about the Apollo?
A lot. A lot. Okay. To the point where I know that the VHF transmitter they used with the battery technology they had, if you were lucky on a good day, maybe had a range of 50 miles. And they punched through 250,000 miles and the Van Allen belts, and they were sending data. Remember, we didn't even have 1200 baud modems till 20 years later. And they were they were beaming back 10 frames per second of video and full audio, and it was doing two-way communication with pinpoint accuracy from 2 moving targets. Oh, I'm about to have an aneurysm. It's horrible.
I didn't know this about you, but you don't believe that they actually landed on the moon is what you're trying to get at.
No, it's way worse than that. I'm saying the entire NASA program is a sham from beginning to end. The only reason NASA was created was to keep the truth of where we are under wraps. So yeah, Apollo, and they had to do it. They absolutely had to militarize space, and they had to fake it. And when they did it, the production techniques aged terribly, to where we were questioning it. Even the conspiracy guys were questioning it back in the 70s and 80s, at early, way before the internet. And then when the internet came out, they were comparing. I mean, look at. I mean, I could show you a single image from Apollo 12. In fact, I think I sent one to the station about a month ago, and I said, "Look, take a look at this thing. There's at least 7 things wrong, 7 impossible things in this photo. They were beautiful. Some of these shots were absolutely beautiful, but they were absolutely wrong. They could not happen in real life. They could only happen on a stage. I mean, intersecting shadows alone. Come on, you have one light source." The sun. The shadows go in one direction. That's what happens outside when you're walking outside. The shadows always go in one direction. And we had, 4 or 5 different directions, which could have only come from a hot spot that was maybe 50 yards behind the target. Again, the average person doesn't know any of this stuff. They didn't get it. Or the splay pattern, the 10,000 foot-pounds of thrust that supposedly blew into what appears to be volcanic ash, covering the whole moon's surface, and yet when it hit and blew around, nobody got to rock. Nobody dug a hole. It's like, oh yeah, here's the rock. How deep was this ash? Nobody even talked about that.
So when they placed a mirror down on the moon, which they use to kind of measure it and tell the distance that it is, and see that the moon is kind of pulling away from us very slowly each year, you don't believe that happened?
Nope. No. It's ridiculous. The Apollo program makes no sense. Think of it this way. In fact, here's one of the questions I threw at a Georgetown physicist, which was one of the 5 questions. That we won't get into the first 4 right away, but the 5th one I threw at him was the Van Allen radiation trap question, which is, are the Van Allen belts deadly? Yes or no? And it's a trap, because if you say yes, they are deadly, then how did the Apollo program make multiple round trips? I think 6 round trips manned through the Van Allen belts. Nobody died. Nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody got cancer. There's still like 5 of these guys walking around today with aluminum and plastic as shielding, because the only 3 things that can beat radiation are lead, gold, and a whole bunch of water. And if you say...
Well, that's not the only... Okay, go ahead.
What else are you going to put on top of a spaceship? Let me know, because last time I checked...
Yeah, but they didn't spend it's not like they were hanging out there.
Best speed, if the Van Allen belts are at least 60,000 miles thick, and our best speed, if you believe what they claim, is 18,000 miles an hour, that's 3 hours in the belts each way. And I know that Van Allen said, because he had to recant, because he announced it in 59, and then Kennedy says a couple of years later, oh yeah, we're going to go to the moon, and they immediately went back to Van Allen. It's like, oh, how are you going to do it? He's going, we're going to go really, really fast. That's fine. If you want to, I'll give you that. If you say you only spent 2, maybe 3 hours in the belts on the way out, on the way back, you're hitting the brakes, because you got to slow for the whole re-entry thing. You're lingering around there before you come back. So,
well, still, if you go to Chernobyl, for example, like a lot of these Instagram models are now, you stay there for a couple hours, take pictures, you leave. A couple of days later, you come back, stay there for 3 more hours, leave. I mean, you're not going to die of radiation poisoning.
Don't take that up with me. Take it up with Van Allen. He was the guy in 59 that said...
Well, I'm taking it up with you because I'm talking to you. I can't talk. He's dead.
No, Van Allen was one of your icons. Van Allen from NASA said
Well,
that,
I mean, now we're saying that he's my icon.
Well, okay, if he isn't, who is?
I'm with you.
The what?
Except for the whole flat Earth thing. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, I'm just saying that when Van Allen comes out in 59 and he says that it's super, super deadly, no one can ever go through it, and then he has to recant a couple of years later. It's like, well, we're just going to go through it really fast. And then he didn't explain how they got through it really slow on the way back. That's one thing. But okay, fine.
Isn't that part of science? Is that when the evidence is there, you change with that?
Perfect. Which is what leads me into the other part of the question. You say, fine, they're not deadly. Okay, they're not deadly.
I didn't say they weren't deadly. I'm saying they didn't spend so much time there to turn into ghouls from far out.
No. Let's go down this road, because if you're saying they're not deadly-ish, then you go to the.
I didn't say they weren't deadly-ish.
You're saying they're not a big deal. Van Allen, was wrong.
We're not gonna play semantics here.
So was Van Allen right or wrong? Because again, here's where I'm going with this. If you go to the NASA website, even right now, you go to nasa.gov, and you look up, there's a video on there. It's still there. Why they haven't pulled it, I don't know. It's called Orion Trial by Fire, where they're talking about their manned Mars program. And they go into great detail with graphics and a narrator, and they say, we cannot put we're not even going to test manned capsules because we haven't figured out the radiation problem of the Van Allen belts. And this was made at the end of 2014. And I remember bringing this up to Friedman before he died, and he just dropped him. He just didn't know what to do. He goes, "That's thing still up there?" I go, "Yes, it's still up there." And it's like, no, you solved the radiation problem. You solved it 50 years earlier. You solved it in the 60s. In fact, you solved it so well that nobody even died of cancer from radiation. So which is it? Is it deadly or is it not deadly? And the Georgetown physicist, he folded like a card table. Of course, the other 4 questions helped, but that was the big one at the end, and that was it. He was like, and the German television team that set the whole thing up, they apologized. It's sorry, it's not going to happen. So, what can I tell you?
So let's get back to the flat Earth for a second.
Sure.
I want to talk about the ice ring or the ice wall.
Sure.
Which is it again to you? I've heard it described different ways for different interview or different.
I call
videos.
it actually neither. Everybody else brings up I just say it's just the coastline event. It's Antarctica, is what it is. Antarctica starts where, at the edge of, the whatever oceans, and then it continues outward for several thousand miles until you eventually run into a barrier.
Okay.
So,
but I've heard you also say that the U.S. government, well, I mean, not U.S. government, but you're not allowed to fly over Antarctica.
Yeah, pretty much. You are not. Only military and military scientists are allowed down there, with the exception of the occasional tour.
Not always military scientists, but go ahead.
The what?
Go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, with the exceptional tour group, yeah, you can spend 15,000 American and go down there, and they'll escort you out to what they call the South Pole, and you can have your picture taken with penguins. But other than that, explain to me why no corporation in the history of the world is allowed to set up shop there. And they're not even allowed to talk about it, ever. And the treaty is unbroken. It's the only unbroken treaty in the history of treaties, and it's not even up for review until the year 2041. Even though we live in a world of greed and money and power, and Admiral Byrd in the United States Navy came back in the 1950s and said the place is made out of resources. There's nothing stopping you. There's no indigenous animal life, no plant life, no old populations, no ruins. It's just ice and snow, and no corporation can go down there, no matter how much. In fact, they're not even allowed to lobby about it. That's the part that threw me the biggest, which was like, why isn't British Petroleum running full-page ads every month saying, it'd be great for us to go? Why isn't Shell Oil? Why isn't everybody down there carving this thing up, like Admiral Byrd said during his television interview in 1954? In fact, he was worried that there would be some sort of military conflict down there. And then 5 years later, they put this treaty together and said, yeah, nobody should ever go down there ever. Good night, everybody. Roll credits. And that was it. It's bulletproof. Why?
Wasn't that the same treaty that they were working on for Mars and the Moon and different stuff like that? That we can't just divide this up amongst countries, although certain sectors can be controlled by certain countries.
Money,
for scientific use. Go ahead.
The United States lives on, look, we're not the good guys. If we want to start fracking in your backyard tomorrow, we can make that happen, and we do. We bribe and threaten and do all sorts of fun things to people all day long, and that's just fracking to get a little bit of gas. If Admiral Byrd comes out there and says that there's an entire mountain range made out of coal that could fuel the entire world, there's oil, there's gas, there's minerals, and there's uranium, and he's really worried that people are going to start scraping over this thing, why would
We'd say they have weapons of mass destruction, right? High five.
What about the weapons of mass destruction?
No, it was a joke.
Oh, I get it. No. Believe me, you and I probably share some of the same things on different conspiracies, no question. And it was one of the first clues that I did, and I'm not trying to pick here, and I don't know you very well, which is I've had friends literally, at all. I have friends that tell me, it's like, oh yeah, the entire royal family is made out of lizard people, and yet right. I come back at them, I go, oh, that's really interesting. I go, what about flat Earth? And they go, get the hell out of here. It's like, really? Because you just said the whole lizard thing, and yet I'm the crazy one? Come on. I mean, I have an opinion on every conspiracy you could ever think of, and I hated this one until one day I didn't. So
maybe you won't hate the draconian type, lizard people that are the royal family.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I mean, there's some I like better than others. Do I think that Elvis had Bigfoot's baby? No. But if anyone brings up something to me that I either haven't heard of or say, oh, hey, let's revisit this, I can't shoot it down because I start my day with the weirdest thing apparently ever, the thing that triggers a whole bunch of people.
I feel like you're taking shots at David Icke. It makes me feel like really nervous. David Icke is a personal friend of mine, a very personal friend.
No, I've got nothing against David Icke. The only person, no, not at all. And I know he's addressed it. The only conspiracy topic that really didn't dovetail in was Richard Hoagland out of all of them, and because of the whole, he said there's a secret space program. Not just is there a normal space program, but we have like 5 million people living on the moon and hundreds of thousands of people already living on Mars. And when he was supposed to show up at a debate in some station, and he bailed. It was a no-show, and we had to go off with somebody else, and he's never spoken to us since. No, everybody else, I have no beef with them.
Well, back to the ice wall thing.
Yeah.
You can actually, if you'll find someone who's willing to do it, fly you over Antarctica. The problem is the fuel and the money, and the second problem is that the reason why, like, Delta and other people won't do that is because of the Tower Act, which you have to have airports within a certain point of each other. That way it would reduce crashes. I mean, a lot of this, too, if you look at Alaska, I mean, there's certain areas of Alaska to where there's a lot of plane crashes because there's nothing but snow and ice and tundra, and people tend to get lost.
And yet,
even with our scientific equipment
and yet,
made by NASA.
What? What? All right.
Never a straight answer.
Oh, absolutely. Or, you know, if you want to go back a few years, need another 7 astronauts.
Okay, well, we don't need to. This isn't a shock jock show like the record you need to know about. This is more of a family show.
Oh, okay.
So they do the shock jock stuff there. I don't like that sort of stuff.
All right.
So go ahead. What are you
no, what I was going to say was, look, when it comes to Antarctica, we've seen just about everything when it comes to, the planes don't fly over it. As far as even, because people have said, well, you know, what if we could find you a pilot with a fully fueled 757, you know, a tanker, you know, it's like, okay, well, a couple things. If you want to do that, if you found a pilot crazy enough to do it, he would have to ignore GPS for the most part, because GPS is a military system and it is going to steer you in a certain direction. He'd have to ignore compasses, and there's not a lot of landmarks, and he'd have to run the risk when he got out there, if the military told him not to fly in a certain point, he would have to ignore it. Would he risk all these things? Why? What's in it for him? It's, you know, the treaty screams go away. Everything about that place screams go away. I mean, the Antarctic, most people don't know that as far as continents go, most of the Antarctic...
Well, like vaccines, isn't that more of a public safety thing? Saying, look, you're going to get lost, so there's no way to refuel from here to there.
In some cases, the distance actually should be shorter to go across the Antarctic than to go across one of the big oceans. Not necessarily the Indian Ocean, but the South Atlantic or definitely the South Pacific. It should be shorter in some cases. I mean, we fly over the North Pole all the time. I mean, I don't know if it's the magnetic North Pole, but we fly over it all the time. South Pole, in fact, I've read a Wikipedia thing where they said, well, it's because it's too cold. It's like, what are you talking about? When you get up at certain altitudes, it's always -30 or whatever it is. It's always really, really cold. And by the way, your Alaska comment reminds me of the woman who was flying from, I think, the Philippines to Los Angeles. And her water broke. It was on one of the big jets, and instead of continuing, which would have been closer to Hawaii, they diverted north to Anchorage, of all places, with, I think, probably not as great hospitals. I'm sure Hawaii has some fantastic hospitals considering the senior citizens that go out there. And they went to Anchorage instead. And you say, okay, what's the point? My point is, on a flat Earth, that route makes sense, but on a globe Earth, it does not. So why they?
Well, but there's a lot of things. Like, for example, if you have a flat, let's say we have the flat Earth,
right.
Like let's do the the one like they have at the UN, right? That little map thing that they have there.
Yeah.
The UN also in on this, am I right?
No, not at all. Don't have to be.
Oh, no high five on that one.
Sorry. No, I mean, why you don't have, less is more. This isn't like the Manhattan Project where you had a whole bunch of people making the atomic bomb and then, you know, they all sworn to secrecy where everything was compartmentalized. With this need to know, I mean, I don't think even the astronauts, the current astronauts, everybody since, I think everybody after Apollo was just, they signed the non-disclosures and said, look, it's above your pay grade to know why you're doing this. You're just going to do it. No different than...
Part of the secrecy for the Manhattan Project, though, is the fact that Jonathan Hickman did not want a lot of that out there. So we all know that.
Well, I'm just saying that it's kind of like, as far as compartmentalization goes, it's kind of like when you send a spy out to assassinate somebody. You don't give them the whole backstory and exactly the political intrigue of why he's assassinating somebody. You just tell him, look, pull the trigger, knock this guy out on June 29th at midnight. That's it.
So we're going by the map that we have here. If you actually plan stuff out, wouldn't it be longer to fly on a flat Earth from Australia to, let's say, Hawaii?
Yes. Yeah.
Or
my point, actually.
But they do paths every day that show that it doesn't work like that.
Well,
I mean, we can time the airplanes from when they leave to when they land, and it's Okay, well, go ahead.
That's one of the clues I talked about, which was people say, well, the times don't match up. I go, it doesn't really matter because the routes don't match up either. Meaning, when these planes get out over the oceans, this is a very big point. They get up, I think, 150 miles, maybe 200 tops out of ground radar range. They go dark. They go lost. Their latitude and longitude, which were being accurately tracked, go into approximated or estimated mode, which basically mean we have no idea where that freaking plane is. Well, we approximately know where that plane is, but we don't really know where that plane is. And it never ever comes back until they get within about 150, 200 miles of whatever big landmass they're coming up upon. And you say, okay, what's the point? My point is that
we track them from airport. Well, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, if you have the GPS,
we do track them from. Go ahead.
You track them from space, right, with the GPS system?
No, you can track them from airport to airport.
Fine, show me the routes.
Can't you?
No. Well, airport to airport, what? Like
but my
from
point
Dallas,
is that it's
Dallas to St. Louis?
It's still longer. It's still longer. I mean, how do you adjust for that time? It
doesn't really matter to me because you can't prove the route. See, it's kind of a push.
No, but it does, because it does matter, because that's part of it. I mean, that's the thing, is that you're always so big on evidence,
Yep.
but whenever someone puts something up, you're like, well, it doesn't matter because of this.
Yeah.
Well, just can't you explain that part to me? Because I'm trying to learn. I'm a truth seeker.
No, I can't explain.
I'm just having a hard time following this.
I don't know because I can't prove the route. That's where it all started, which was if I can't prove the flight path, which should be there, the latitude and longitude coordinates should be there for the entire flight.
Well, you're just going in a straight line. Right?
Yes.
From
well,
this
roughly,
point
depending
to this
on
point.
where
so
it is.
So you should be able on a flat Earth to measure out the time.
Again, what does the time mean anything to me if I can't get the latitude and longitude of the flight itself? Meaning, once the flight drops off the radar, I have no idea how they got there. Now, you're right. There is a distance issue. You're absolutely right. There's a perspective issue.
So you think they go into warp speed?
I have no idea. Whatever. There's something going on with the map that we've only been doing this 4 years. But what I'm saying is there's a...
So flat Earth proponents have been around for a lot longer than that.
All right, fine. Flat Earth 2.0. How's that?
I still don't.
What do you want to call it?
I know you're a computer programmer guy. I don't.
No. I mean,
it's
the old guard versus the new guard. In fact, the Flat Earth, the official Flat Earth Society, has nothing to do with this. They waited so long. They finally called me. I said, "Where have you guys been? We've been running just across the countryside, and no, you guys haven't made a peep." And so we've just been doing it through social media. But we've only been doing that for about 4 years. I mean, since the whole YouTube thing happened. But yes, it's been around for a long time, of course. And I'm the first one to say it. I didn't invent Flat Earth. I didn't even invent the new version of Flat Earth.
No, but what about the distances? If the Flat Earth is the way that you guys say it is, then how do we make up for those distances?
Don't know.
And how do we make up for the time not matching up?
Don't know.
I mean, you have to have a theory.
I don't. My theory is there's something wrong. There's something else going on with the map that we don't know, which is why we get in such heated arguments with ourselves about the map. There's something in the perspective where we're not seeing yet. We don't know. Some people have suggested if the jet stream is circular, that they're catching a super jet stream from somewhere. Other people have said, of course, going to warp speed through some sort of teleportation. I don't necessarily buy into either of those, but I know there's something going on. Absolutely. No question, which is I got into it because the flight routes didn't make any damn sense, which was there was all these flights in the Southern Hemisphere, and I had a corporate travel agent from the Southern Hemisphere who said, because you have no idea how hard it is to book flights down here, because there are capital cities between South America and Africa and Australia and the islands, which you cannot get direct flights for, no matter how much money you have. And there's rich people down there say, I want a first class flight from this city to this city. You cannot get them. You have to take double connections or single connections, and they always go wildly north to places. And the pilots have all told me the same thing. It's like they're not going up there to pick passengers up, because it's all about the fuel. All the airlines ever care about is fuel, which is why we got into it. And on a flat map, all these double and triple connections make more sense. They turn from these weird angle triangle things to these shallow dog legs or almost a straight line.
But I mean, how do we know they're not picking up passengers? Because that's always the excuse. We've all been on planes before to where you have to take 2 or 3, but we also know there's more direct flights if you pay for more.
Yeah, but you don't.
I mean, if you fly from here to England, you're still not going to. I mean, you can fly from
But if
Charlottesville to London I mean,
but if you're flying from
on a flat Earth, go ahead.
But if you're flying from South Africa, you're not going all the way up into the north, going like through San Francisco to get to freaking Australia. Or was it Buenos Aires to Australia? There was,
and also there's
you don't pick up that many people. They said it doesn't work like that, and you're doubling.
Well, if you're going to bring up Africa, I mean, there are some countries that you can't fly over because there's no agreements there. There's a chance you could get shot down.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
There's reasons for diverting certain flights to certain places. Others, some airlines don't have. For example, if you were to fly to Arkansas,
right.
Delta doesn't. If you were to fly to Hot Springs, there's no Delta. We have a little airport here, but there's no Delta stall there. Delta has no contract
right.
here, so you can't fly down here.
Right.
You have to fly into Memphis, then to Little Rock. So, and then you drive down
sure.
here.
But
that's with the other airlines too.
I got you. No, that's not bad logic, not at all. The corporate travel agent I was talking to though said that when she'd call up people and say, look, no one could give her an answer, and that would be an easy answer to give. It's like, sorry, you can't fly over this airspace. Sorry, you can't go to this capital city. It's like, she said it's widespread. I mean, out of all the flights in the southern hemisphere, from southern to southern, there is just a tiny handful of nonstops, tiny compared to the north. And she was saying that she goes to the north. She goes, you have no idea how lucky you are. In fact, you can get nonstops just about anywhere. It's just a question of how much money and what time of the day you want to leave. In the southern
hemisphere, if you have a private jet, you can make those type of things out. But if you're flying for Delta or anybody else, the whole thing there is money. You have to make these plans out. You have contracts. Also, you have to pick up enough people, drop off enough people. I mean, there's a reason why things get overbooked. Go ahead.
Sure, no, I got you. I got you. But in the southern hemisphere, it's a nightmare. You can't statistically. It should be a lot higher than that. You can't tell me that 95% of the south to south flights are double connections that go through the north, and that you just have. I mean, seriously, I was looking for days, and I got like the same 5 flights handed to me. Always, it was like, oh yeah, there's this flight and this flight. I'm going, and that's when I had to look at the routes. The 2 clues were based off of this. The first one.
Was this from? Where was this from? Is this from the website of the plane people, or was this from Travelocity, or where were you trying this from?
Oh no, it was any online booking site. They're all pretty much integrated. I think there's only like 4, and they're all merged. But yeah,
well, they have deals with the airlines, so they would just be going by what they went with.
Yes.
So they can't actually. Let's go back to the vacuum and space stuff that I wanted to get back to earlier.
Sure.
Before we do that, let's talk about gravity. I know that your frenemy David Weiss doesn't believe in gravity.
Why?
He believes in something called
I'm still stunned by this. Why are you trying to start a fight between us?
I'm not trying to start a fight between you guys.
No. I'm gonna stop this right now.
And
until you answer this, if you don't answer this the right way, I'm leaving. Which is.
Okay, well, can you answer my thing first, and I'll come right back to this, because we only got like 8 or 10 minutes left.
Go.
And I just want to get this.
Go.
So, do you believe in gravity or not?
Yes, of course I do. Most of the flat earthers do believe in gravity. I also do believe in density, though. I mean, you take a helium balloon, you let it go, it's going to rise up. We are living in a thin version of water. 4 parts nitrogen to 1 part oxygen. Different than H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. And that is...
Okay, before we get to the David Weiss thing, because I don't want to run out of time.
Yeah.
So we do both agree that gravity is real.
Yes, gravity is real. Yes.
Okay, so if we go on a flat Earth model, since gravity always pulls to the center, wouldn't that be the same way with Earth?
What?
The further you go out, the more gravity would be pulling you back to the center. The more buildings would be bent more toward the center, because gravity is pulling in.
No,
but yet we don't have that.
No, that's the whole Vsauce argument, which is no. I mean, in this case, we're talking about first off, we're talking about a flat disk that's not in space. It's probably just sitting somewhere. Who knows? In a lab on God's desk. I don't know where it is.
On a turtle, right? Terry Pratchett fan.
No, it doesn't have to be a turtle. No, because that turtle is also in space. If you believe it. No, I'm saying that there doesn't have to be space at all. So if there's just a flat disk, gravity is just pulling down. I believe the difference between what scientists say is gravity in a globe and what I say that gravity is in a flat Earth is very, very similar. And that is, they say gravity is pulling things straight down to the center of a sphere, and I'm saying it's a disk and things are just pulling straight down.
Well, just the center, period, is how gravity works. So still, wouldn't that be the same thing? You're being pulled.
Don't get into that. Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of your scientist gods, says that
Hey, I'm not a fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson. Okay, hashtag me too.
Well, find me a. Well, yeah, there's that. But I mean, find me a more high.
Michio Kaku. Go with Michio Kaku.
Okay, fine. Michio Kaku. He would say the same thing, and that is that they can't say what gravity is. They can only say what it does. They can only say the symptoms of it. They say it's this magical molecular force that pulls things down to the center of a ball. And I say it's a magical molecular force that just pulls things straight down. Just because you go out on the edge and technically there's more density, if you're looking lengthwise, I suppose, if you got to the edge and then maybe. But in this case, I think the gravity is artificial. I think that if this whole place is a structure, a building with walls and a floor and a ceiling, that gravity is whatever the builders say it is. Oh, yeah, and by the way, gravity isn't nearly strong enough to hold the atmosphere on versus the vacuum of space. No way, no how, ever in a million years. I'll give you a quick example. If you had the second floor of your building, if you turned it into a vacuum chamber, and you had a cork in your ceiling, and you pulled it out or opened it or whatever, you know full well what would happen, and that is the air would equalize extremely fast, extremely violently, and you would either black out or die or both. And my question would be, why didn't the gravity in your office keep the air there? Why not?
Well, we do know that like there is what you're talking about is like the atmosphere on here, and it's still encased on Earth. But other places where we don't have the magnetosphere, like say Mars, a lot of their atmosphere was swept away. Definitely Mercury's was swept away, and
the planets,
Venus.
Right.
What?
The planets that you think exist, those.
Right, they do exist.
Right, they're not just lights in the sky.
No.
Well, there you go. There's the big difference. And you
Not just lights in the sky.
They're just lights in the sky. That's all they are. And the only reason we have air in here is it's a compressed system. It's a pressurized, enclosed system. Vacuum of space would rip the atmosphere off this place so quickly, it would never get started. Life would never, ever happen here. You're living in a greenhouse. Hence the term greenhouse gases. It's literally a greenhouse.
Hence the term greenhouse effect, which is what we call Venus, our little brother, right?
The red light, yeah, sure.
Well, no, Venus.
Mars is red,
band.
Venus would be white, Saturn...
Venus the band.
Got it. No, I mean, seriously, if we are in a building, there doesn't have to be space. There doesn't have to be space. We've been conditioned for so many years, so young an age, that we just believe in space because we're told space. It doesn't have to be. All you have to do is create the illusion of space. Planetarium. When you go, people say, "Oh, I've seen the moons of Jupiter." Fine, take a pair of binoculars, go to a planetarium, look at Jupiter, and they say that's not fair. I go, does it look more or less real? And they say, well, you're in a building, it doesn't count. I go, actually, it's my point. When you walk out of that building, why aren't you in just a much bigger one?
Sorry, I keep coughing.
That's right.
I have kind of a sore throat.
That's right.
The back to this sort of thing, if you are given a lot of evidence out there because this is what it kind of seems like, much like with anti-vaxxers and other people, when you're given a ton of evidence, because the thing about skeptics is you're supposed to be skeptical. But the idea behind it is that once you're given enough evidence, then you're like, okay, well, I can no longer be skeptical of that because now we have enough proof.
If somebody puts me in an astronaut suit and throws me in a vacuum chamber and I'll sign the waiver and tell me how I don't die, then I will quit Flat Earth tomorrow if I survive. Everything's fine. And I have things that you can test to see if it's a pure vacuum. It costs about $4 from a hardware store. And I put this challenge out for the last 2.5 years. Science could shut me down in 2 seconds. All they have to do is give me an astronaut suit. And, of course, you might want to explain the technology in that magic backpack that tells me how I don't die. No scientist, no science advocate has ever explained it to me. What thing defies thermodynamics in that backpack?
I want to get back to the whole because we're running out of time, but I want to get back to the whole you don't believe in outer space or the planets or anything like that.
Right.
So what is above us then?
Outs.
Is it like what some people believe, which is there's these huge lights that are above us, like huge light bulbs that are shining down light upon us?
Yep. You're in a giant advanced Truman show. That's all you're in. It's all you've ever been in. We believe the world that is presented to us, and we've been living
You
it.
get a red pill?
The what?
It's a Matrix reference.
Well, I mean, if you want to go the digital world, sure. And I've said this in the book, and I said, look, I hate to break it to flat earthers, but if it is flat and if it is enclosed, it's probably digital, which is a whole nother thing, which I don't usually like to get into because it's really a mind bender, even though the Matrix is 20 years old this year.
So what don't you want to get into? Are you talking about the grandfather?
Well, no. What I mean is, if it is digital, if it's some sort of virtual reality, which is very, very possible, if it's simulated, I mean, the double slit experiment just screams it. Not only that, but the neuroscience and free will experiment. I mean, the double slit experiment pretty much proved it 10, 15 years ago. That it's got some sort of virtual properties to it, but I don't like bringing it up to people because the average person.
Okay, now go into a little bit more of that because I'm interested in that.
Okay, the double slit experiment was something they did with.
No. I mean about the virtual reality things. I think you mean like a simulation.
Like a simulation, yeah. No
reality?
Different than the Matrix or the movie The 13th Floor.
So like a grandfather simulation.
Grandfather simulation. Is that
the idea that we're a computer program within a computer program?
Oh yeah. The 13th Floor was based on a 1975 German film called World on a Wire, which was based on a 1970.
Well, let's just stick to this right now because we're running out of time, and I want to go more into this because this is kind of fascinating. Yeah. I like getting a little Grant Morrison-y on this.
Okay.
So, go ahead. That's what you believe?
I do, and that is, look, I love Flat Earth, I really do, but I think it's just the beginning of it. Flat Earth, the reason why it's resonating, the reason why I'm doing it is it's easy to understand. Trying to tell a person even now about virtual reality is still tough. I thought it would have been easier in 2019 or 2015.
But you mean simulation?
A simulation, virtual simulation.
There's two different
Matrix.
things if we're going to do semantic stuff.
Between.
So let's go by it this way, okay? Right. In order to have a simulation, let's say grandfather simulation, have you ever you've done this before because you're a computer guy, right? Yeah. You're a computer programmer.
Yep.
You know what it's like when you plug up like 4 or 5 computers to each other.
Okay.
There's little drag going down from each one.
Sure.
Each one has a little bit slower process.
Right.
So if we were to stop and take a look far out into the galaxy, wouldn't we need a loading screen instead of being able to look at planets from like a microscope? Not microscope.
It depends.
That you look through?
What if the viewer?
Telescope.
What if the display system, which would be I don't even know the resolution, not 8K because we have those now, like Mandelbrot resolution. What if the resolution could adjust depending on the viewer? What if the viewer was instant, so it didn't have to crank up the resolution until the civilization developed a technology that could do it, and only then did it.
But but there's no drag throughout our existence. There's no quote-unquote sandwiches in the Matrix.
I beg to differ with between the double slit. Seriously,
can you give me a proof or an example of that?
Okay. Well, the double slit experiment basically says that.
No, just another proof of that.
Okay, a different proof. How about seriously, neuroscience and free will, which I almost guarantee you haven't looked into. Which is
okay. That's not. Let's go because we're programmed, right? So let's say we're a oops, my headphones almost went out. Let's say that we're in this simulation, right? So we have several. We wouldn't be the only one. There would be generation after generation after generation testing out how timelines would work.
Potentially.
So this keeps going. In order to do this, you have to have an enormous amount of power to do these types of simulations. Yeah. So you would have to have maybe, let's say, a supercomputer the size of the moon. How are we going to come up with that type of power to do that sort of simulations that we have today? We would all be in for this world.
No. Well, I'm saying that we had nothing to do with the building of the reality we're sitting in right now. That it was whoever was here before us, whatever civilization, and there have been a bunch before us.
Anunnakis.
Well, you take your pick. I mean, take whatever civilizations were in the sunken cities off Japan or India or the Bosnian pyramids, the real pyramids, or Bimini Road. Take your pick. There's a lot of them to choose from. I'm just saying that whoever built this was much. I used the line from Contact, which I love so much because it was humble. When she goes, "Did you build this?" You know, when she finally got there, and he goes, "We didn't build it. We don't know who did." Well, you know, we're just.
So you're saying there's no proof
of a simulation.
Mark, this is really. Hold on. This is really great. I would like to have you on more to talk about this because we ran out of time. Okay. Can I get with them and have us get details on it?
Sure.
Because the next show is about to start, Bad News Radio.
Oh, okay, sure.
So let's see if they want to ask you any questions real quick.
We're going to roll into a third show.
Because we'll do kind of like a, you're being passed around right now.
Oh, God. All right.
So,
all right.
If that's cool
I can go for a little while longer, but eventually I got to get...
All right. Just hold on 1 second while we set this up, okay? All right, KUHSLP Radiopedia. We'll be back in a minute. Bad News Radio is coming up right next with Ryan, so just hold on. All right, you're listening to Bad News Radio with Ryan. We're just getting started here now. Mark, are you still there?
I am still here.
Oh, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. So they said they wanted to kind of carry on this conversation. I don't know. I don't know much about you. I've been kind of looking up some of your stuff here.
I'm mostly into flat Earth, but I'm completely insane, obviously. And now I'm on my third. This is got to be a first for me. The third show in a row on the same station.
Yeah, I thought it's pretty interesting that they carried on with you for that long. So I figured
I think they wanted to get
maybe.
I think they wanted to get some drama in the last one. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, okay. So besides your theory on flat Earth, is there any other
conspiracies?
Kind of big conspiracy theory that you really you really believe and
champion? Well, there's some, but I don't think there's some I can't probably bring up on this network. I don't want to upset people. I mean, there's obviously some big ones out there, but I mean, if let's put it this way, I started in the conspiracy world, and I've got an opinion on just about every conspiracy you can think of. Seriously,
right.
I mean, let's do some of the big ones besides Apollo, because that's linked to flat Earth anyway. Pearl Harbor, JFK, 9/11, every American war. I probably shouldn't, and probably, unless you really, really want to get into vaccinations, I have an opinion about that. I even have an exclusive conspiracy that nobody ever thought of. That's how.
What is that?
The Panama Canal.
What about it?
Or the Titanic. The Titanic's a good one, but that's just insurance fraud. We can get into that later.
Right.
The Panama Canal was something I looked at, which was, okay, think about it this way. I'll do it really quick for you. So the Hoover Dam, big engineering project, right? Lots of cement.
Of course, yeah.
So how many people died during the building of the Hoover Dam? Probably, I think, something along the line of like 70, which, acceptable back in those days. People fall into the cement. There was a great height. The technology wasn't great. Our safety standards were abysmal by comparison. And we lost about 70 guys. Do you have any, and by comparison, the Panama Canal, which was really just a big ditch, right? It was just this big, giant, canal that they carved and linked up a lake to an ocean, which was also tied to an ocean. Do you know how many people died in the making of that thing?
How many?
The better part of 6,000. A lot. All civilians.
Why? Why is that?
Well, that's just it. And you say, wow, that's a lot, right? And then here's your reaction. I will guarantee you be like, oh, okay. And I'll say, well, they died from malaria and yellow fever. All right. And then most people, they go, well, of course, that's expected. It's Central America. People die from malaria and yellow fever. And it's like, there's no conspiracy there. I go, well, yeah, it is. Because the Americans, we were the ones that finished the Panama Canal. We didn't start it. In fact, it was the French. Mm-hmm. The French had the idea first. They were there just before we were. And they lost so many guys. They lost over 20,000 men trying to finish this.
Yeah. I'm reading that they lost over over 20,000, about 22,000 men from diseases and accidents, and the savings of 800,000 different investors because of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The French people started rioting because you can imagine there were. I mean, we're talking about civilians here. This is not. They're not sending out troops. I mean, I'm sure the Army Corps of Engineers had a presence there, but it was mostly civilians. So, okay, where's the conspiracy? The conspiracy is this, and this is corporations, which is. The Americans knew this. They knew how many the French had lost. The French equipment was still down there when they got there. And they were fully expected, it's like, okay, what can we do? And even with the advances we had with bug repellent and mosquito netting, which I think we pretty much had to invent for this, they were fully expected to lose 10,000 men. And they sent them anyway. And I guarantee you, during the recruiting, when they were recruiting engineers from all parts of the United States, they didn't tell them, oh, yeah, you got about a 1 in 8 chance of dying when you go down there.
Right.
So it's like there's your conspiracy, which is they didn't tell them. It's like, look, that's a lot of guys. It's a huge amount of people. And you're walking them into that meat grinder, which isn't a war. I mean, we've had smaller armed conflicts that didn't lose that many guys. But they sent them anyway because the ends justified the means, which was, look, we wanted to build. And I got to tell you, I hate to do this, to say this to anyone who may be listening, which is, look, you can put a price on human life. You absolutely can. We do it in the military all the time, and we do it in civilian life all the time. So
I can agree with that. So that's what everything runs on, right?
Yeah. I mean,
that's what the whole United States runs on, right?
Yes. We look. It's in every military tactic we've ever done, which is there are pawns in the game, and then there are bait. Look at something simple like the Mexican-American War. Where history doesn't tell the whole story. It's like Texas wanted to be its own country. They couldn't beat Mexico by themselves. The United States cut them a deal. It's like, look, you can be your own state, have a whole ton of territory, but we got to start this war. And it's like, okay, you sacrifice the Alamo. 200 guys, sacrifice them, remember the Alamo. And then what was the exchange rate on that? 200 guys, what did we get? We got Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, because there used to be an old Mexico, apparently, and that worthless piece of real estate called California. Trillions in real estate, and we got it for 200 guys. It's
all worthless real estate to me.
Well, the point is that it's huge tracts of land that was traded for men, and it's one of the unfortunate truths. I'm going to say inconvenient truths, but one of the unfortunate truths of what we are. We, in conflicts, the pawns don't get to know what's happening. And so
when did you start kind of getting the flat Earth thing in your head? When did that start really setting in with you?
2014 is when I looked into it. I hated it. I remember I was conspiracy bored. I looked at just about every conspiracy you could think of, and I remember there was a video recommended to me, and they've been recommended to me for probably 4 or 5 months at that point. And I remember clicking on it, and the first one I clicked on, I actually had a visceral response. I actually got embarrassed. And I was sitting in a house by myself in Boulder, Colorado, and going, why am I getting flushed? Clicking on a flat Earth video. Look, I've been in the internet a long time. There's a lot of weird stuff out there. Nothing's embarrassed me until this point. And then I followed up on a few more, and I said, well, this is silly. Flat Earth is ridiculous. Everybody knows this. Flat Earth has been disproven forever. If not 500 years, then a couple thousand years, depending on who you talk to. Mm-hmm. So I said, all right, I can knock this thing out in a weekend. It's not on my bucket list, but I'm going to make it on my bucket list. And 9 months later, I'm about to break a keyboard over my head because I can't prove the globe anymore. I can't do it. I don't know why I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it anymore. I mean, yeah, you could sort of get there, but there'd be too many loose threads, too many unanswered questions. And so I made a series of videos called Flat Earth Clues, and I said, okay, Internet Hive Mind, tell me where I went wrong. I can't prove the globe anymore. Here's my ideas. And I didn't use any math, very little science. I just connected a whole bunch of dots. I said, if this is true, or this is true, and this is true, or these weird things connect together, and they all point towards us living in some sort of enclosed structure, some snow globe, some Truman show, then where did I go wrong? And that was in the beginning of 2015. And then everything just opened up. I had everybody calling me. And the media and the general public was one thing, but the subject matter experts, that's what threw me. All branches of the military, pilots, engineers, air traffic controllers, everybody that had to do with transportation, surveyors, they all said the same thing. They kept calling and saying, you know what? you may not be that crazy, because we've heard of the curvature of the Earth and we've heard of the spin of the Earth. We never use it, ever. It's just something in a book that we just never use. It's a chart, maybe, that we see when we're rookies, and we're all told it's like, you don't have to sweat it. You'll never.
Are you a religious person?
No. Well, I wasn't. Let's put it this way. I was raised born again Christian, but then when I got into tech, I taught proprietary software for 20 years. I didn't go to church for probably 25 years. But this brought me back to, I'm not going to say the same place that I was when I left, because I was really naive. I mean, I grew up thinking there was literally only one religion before I went to university. But when I got into this, because of the default shape of it, it screams some sort of creator. Now, at that point, you're just splitting hairs. It's like, okay, because you go one of two ways. It's either a very advanced old civilization that's much more powerful than ourselves, or it's Santa Claus on a Sunday morning in a giant white bathrobe.
Well, the reason I ask is because I have a friend who delved into the flat Earth stuff for a little bit, and he almost, I wouldn't say exclusively, but a good part of that was based off of his religious beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
At least. And him believing in God, and him believing in a higher power. And so it directly tied into the things that he believed as far as Christianity goes, somehow.
Yeah, and that I see that a lot. At least half of our community, are strong Christians. I can't speak for a lot of the countries. I can tell you the United States and Canada, quite a bit of Europe, it's at least half Christian. The other four major religions all play a part, though. I mean, Islam and Judaism, share some of the same stories. Buddhism and Hinduism, not as much, but they're in it, because they mostly, I think, for revenge against science. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The Christianity has the upper hand, though, compared to the other four, because there's a lot of chapter and verse and stories that tie to. They all point to the same thing, which is that's some flat created world. I mean, heck, not to quote chapter and verse, because I won't for this show, but the Tower of Babel alone. Where's that tower going? If it's on a spinning ball, it's just this stick stuck into an orange that's just spinning wildly through space. There's no bridge to heaven there. But if it's an enclosed system, it's only going one place, and that's up. So it's, and I didn't even look into it. Honestly, I made the first 8-9 clues, and I didn't even touch on religion. And then the Christian community started emailing me en masse, and they said, "Oh, you better stop dancing around. You better start, telling us, give us your opinion on this." And then I looked into it, and made a couple. I did not quote a single chapter and verse. And next thing you know, I have Bible literalists that are creating brand new channels and brand new websites, and really, really getting into it. So yeah, your friend is not alone by a long stretch.
Yeah, I think he eventually kind of backed out of it, but it seemed like through his kind of, need to understand and believe that there's something bigger out there that we don't understand, and that it was created. I don't know how to say this the best way. That the Earth was created in a much different way than man sees it, and it was created in a way that a higher power could kind of control humanity, and
sure.
I don't know.
No. You're right on with that. No, that's pretty much it. Which is, you're talking about, again, if what I kind of joke, and I'm not trying to be glib here when I say this. Fine, it may not be God who built this place. He may have subcontracted out the work. And if whoever it isn't divine, well, maybe they're at least one step closer to having God's phone number than we do. So,
right.
And yes, you're absolutely right. There's this sense of purpose. One of the other big reasons why religion really plays a huge factor into this is because it brings purpose right back to you. Instead of science saying that you're this tiny little pebble that's flying through an impossible universe and you can be snuffed out at any time, you're just an accident, part of a giant cosmic explosion, your life means nothing. Instead of that, it's the exact opposite. You're in some sort of building that was built just for you. and you are the subject of this place. You are, you're being watched. You're being, I don't know if looked after is the word, but you're definitely being analyzed, and who knows, you're being judged. But it's an interesting place, but it makes it much more personal. And there's a lot of people that, I've seen people brought to tears, and I know that eventually I'm going to catch some grief because some people are trying to tie it to like a religious cult in some way. But it's like, no, you're not. It's going to be tough to do because we don't have a Bible, we don't have robes, we don't chant, we have no compound, nothing like that. It's just everywhere. Everyone, it's all online. It's all social media. So
you can't throw yourselves off the edge of the earth yet.
No. Even though when our cruise for 2020 was announced, which is basically just a social cruise, because we have conferences now, and the conference this year was it's supposed to be in Dallas, and the conference next year is supposed to be in Miami, on a cruise boat. Immediately, the media jumped on it and said, "Oh, they're going to take a cruise out to the edge of the earth." Like, really, from Miami? We're going to, how long a trip that would be in a freaking cruise boat? They wouldn't even have the gas to get.
So how many people show up to those kind of things?
Oh, hundreds. It's an amazing experience for a lot of them because it's the first time they've been. And I know you don't know much about it. The Behind the Curve documentary followed the first one in Raleigh. In 2017.
I know about it. I haven't seen it, but I know about it for sure.
It's amazing because there's a lot of people that are really just excited to be in a room with other people that aren't going to judge them. Like anything, I kind of I hate to use this comparison, but it's kind of like being in a happy AA meeting, if there is such a thing, right?
Or like a brony convention. Is it similar to that?
Yeah, kind of, where people are. It's kind of like part Star Trek convention, part Comic-Con, part UFO. There's a lot of things wrapped.
Well,
go ahead.
One thing I can say about it, and I don't believe in it at all.
Sure.
I don't go that far with it.
Right.
I know there's lots of conspiracies. There's lots of conspiracies I'll latch onto for a little bit and try to figure out more about. But the flat Earth thing has never really stuck with me. But I will tell you one thing: if there's people that'll follow it and they don't feel alone in it, go for it. If it's not hurting anybody, I don't care. I really don't give a shit.
I don't think it's hurting anybody either. I mean, really, we've had hundreds of regional meetups and more conferences than I can count. But
I mean, you'll have if you have extremists of any sort in flat earther mindset. I think the most extreme you can go is actually set out and try to find the boundaries, which you'd have to go to probably Antarctica, right? Is that
would be one
accurate?
Of the places,
so you go to Antarctica,
yep.
And so that would be an extremist way of kind of, I'm going to find out what this is all about. You go to Antarctica. Well, I mean, science is doing the same thing.
Right.
Science is the more extreme end of science is sending everybody out to Antarctica to kind of find the like the edge of existence of what we can survive on. So I would say even to that extent, if people start saying, "Oh, well, I'm going to go to Antarctica to see the edge of the Earth," that extreme isn't. I still don't think it's really hurting anybody. Like I said, science is already doing it.
I agree.
They're already sending people to the bottom of the ocean.
Where things got a little ugly for us recently was during the Behind the Curve documentary, for example. There was a at the conference in Raleigh, and this was back 2 years ago now. Not a year and a half, where there was a 12-year-old kid who walked up to the microphone and was asking me questions, and he was on our side. And at that point, the directors and producers turned against us. At that point, it was just going to be a human interest piece, and they said, "Okay, it's all fun and games until you get the kids involved." And it's like, okay, first, we're not marketing to kids. We've got no special program. We're not Joe Camel. We don't have any special children's books out there. And as far as that goes, it's like, okay, first off, kids are always more pliable when it comes to anything. They're more accepting to just about any ideas that are out there. So that's where the scientists and the scientific groups like National Geographic and Discovery Channel and History Channel, they're having problems with it because they're asking questions like, okay, what happens if this gets out of control? What happens? I don't know. Do you all of a sudden start attacking science? What happens to medicine? I mean, seriously, they were asking these questions. They left it out of the interview. What happens to technology? What happens to medicine? What happens to our civilization as we know it? Could you be ushering in a new dark ages? I'm going, wow, that's some pretty heavy stuff. And I don't know. I mean, we seem to be a pretty happy bunch. Let me put it this way. I've never seen a conspiracy this positive before. Meaning, every other conspiracy is dark and brooding. You know, conspiracy people usually like their conspiracies like Heath Ledger Batman type thing. You know, dark and gritty and talk like I'm gargling marbles. But
well, at the end of it always turns out to be something apocalyptic.
Well,
in most conspiracy theories.
Oh yeah.
If this comes out, then it's the end of the world. You know.
Well,
the economy's screwed, or this is screwed, religion's screwed, humanity's screwed.
That's what I kind of joked about with in the title of my book. It was called Flat Earth Clues: End of the World, which gets into the whole problem because science is treating this, and of course, again, they're trying to protect.
You used a pun. You said end of the world. I get it now.
Yeah, you get it. Yeah. But yeah, and you know where I was going with this, and I understand where they're coming from. I do, because there is a threat to this, and there's not going to be, there's going to be a loser in any type of thing. But I'm saying that this has opened up the minds of a lot of people to accept a lot of ideas they wouldn't have even thought. If you can get your head around flat Earth, you don't. I mean, if you're really into flat Earth, you don't judge anybody for anything anymore. You'll look at any conspiracy. You'll question everything.
That makes sense.
And so far it's been really positive. We have for example, we have people, find me another conspiracy where you make happy songs about it. We have
do you think the Holocaust happened or not?
Right, really? We can talk about that? I do think the Holocaust happened.
Okay.
I know the numbers that were involved? No, I don't, because both sides are going to, like anything, it's no different than, I don't want to diminish this in any way. It's kind of like politicians where they say, well, 51% voted for this and 49% for this. Do we know the actual numbers? No. But what we can agree on is they had their own camps. And that you kind of got to look into. And I don't know how old you are, but remember the old television show Hogan's Heroes? With
of course, yeah.
Okay, they had everybody in the same freaking camp, right? They had the Italian and the French guy and the British guy. The Jewish people had their own camps, and there was a problem there. And I want to quote. There was a movie called The Debt, I think. It was called. It was an Israeli film that was turned into an American movie, and there was this quote, and I'm not picking, right? There's this quote when they were arresting. It was based on a true story where they were hunting down a German officer in the 60s from the camps. And I can't believe they actually wrote this into the script. And he goes, you want to know why we did it? Along these lines, he goes, 1,000 prisoners, and we held you with 4 guards. He goes, and nobody. He goes, nobody fought back. Nobody made a break for it. Nobody was willing to lay down their lives for somebody else. No one was, there was obvious, 4 guards. You don't have nearly enough bullets. Even if you emptied everything and hit everybody perfectly, you could totally overrun it, and nobody did it. And he was basically saying that they were too passive. If you're that passive, you don't deserve to be here. And so at that point, I'm going, okay, that's a little heavy stuff. And I come from a German family, and it's like, oh yeah, I see exactly the logic he's using there. So did it happen? Do I think it happened? Yes, I do. Are we ever going to know the exact numbers? No, we are not. Because nobody's, everybody's got a stake in it, and some people want to diminish it. I mean, hell, you want to go that far? The series that just came out recently, which I love so much, Chernobyl. Which talked about the whole 5-part series about the British production about the Chernobyl disaster. You watch that thing, full well that hundreds of thousands of people died horribly, in slow, agonizing ways. And the official death count, even today, even though the Soviet Union is gone, the official death count is 31. And that's because the Soviets wanted to save face. It's like, we didn't create this thing. They literally cordoned up. The exclusion zone is something like 2,800 square miles. Still to this day, and it's like, no, 31 people, that's it, that's all that died. It's like you're watching this go, full well the troops alone that they killed. Now granted, they didn't drop dead right there, but they irradiated all of them.
Chernobyl,
the what
you said during Chernobyl, during the meltdown, right?
Well, yeah, the meltdown from 1986 it's a brilliant. If anyone hasn't seen it, seriously, find a series. It's on HBO. Where
now
go ahead
now Fukushima, where there were no reported casualties, correct?
That's a whole other thing, which is...
I don't think anybody actually was reported as a casualty.
Yep.
Now, the long-term effects are different, but that's a whole different story. There were no reported immediate casualties from Fukushima.
And the Japanese want to save face more than, as much as anybody. In fact, even more. Honor is so important to them. And so
you don't think you think that there were actual immediate casualties in Fukushima?
Oh God, yes, there had to be. You going? They evacuated. Heck, I had a cousin that was living over in Tokyo, and she was an American. Well, she is an American, and she got out of there. I mean, she had 2 girls and her husband. They moved immediately. They got the hell out of Dodge, and that was like people that were over there on work visas and doing this stuff. Anybody, they're like, because remember, the Chernobyl thing had already happened. We know what's going on there. They're like, yeah, it doesn't matter what they evacuated towns. Were there immediate casualties? Sure, but that's not the big thing. The big thing is the long-term effects, which is.
Let me ask you this, because this is why I'm asking you. Me and my friend were actually talking about this and the benefit of nuclear energy. And what we were kind of going back and forth about is coal mining and coal things powered by coal have had a lot more casualties throughout the years than nuclear energy has. There's a lot more tragedies that have happened because of coal mining and immediate casualties because of coal mining. And we were kind of tossing back and forth, like, in the long run, is nuclear energy going to be a sustainable, less dangerous, more safe alternative or main source of energy as compared to coal energy?
Yeah.
And what we were kind of getting at is that it's a relatively young technology.
Yeah.
Nuclear energy is, and there's only been a very few amount of what you would call tragedies from nuclear power plants that have happened. So, and with coal, it's obvious. It's something that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know do you think that nuclear energy is beneficial if you count out all the use of nuclear energy for weapons and everything? If you could talk about nuclear power plants, do you think that that's it's a cleaner, more efficient, safer
I got you.
energy
If it was me,
than anything else?
You're talking short-term versus long-term, which is, of course,
right.
Short-term coal, has their problems as well. I mean, they belch a lot of stuff.
Well, coal was just the beginning of it. Coal was just a part of it, but in the bigger scale, is nuclear energy really that much safer?
No, it's not. In fact, I would treat it, if I had to do it over again. If I was a high-ranking member of whatever power structure you want to say, I would treat nuclear weapons and power plants, fission and fusion, the same as I do biological weapons. An interesting idea, but you don't want to use it. I would ban it, no different than, I don't want to use a Star Trek reference necessarily, but do a complete ban on everything along those lines. Because remember, it started out as weapons, and then we said, oh yeah, we could also turn it into power plants. But the only reason the power plants happened was because of the weapons program.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
No, I wouldn't, because, like, for example, if you watch the thing on Chernobyl, they literally accidentally, the Soviets, because they did it on the cheap. Right? They copied us and they made a cheap version, a big shock in the 80s. I mean, they're much better at it now. But back then they made a cheap copy of our plants, and it had a problem. There was a design flaw that it could turn it into a bomb. Now, not a bomb that you would, expect, like a Hiroshima, Nagasaki type bomb, but a bomb that we talk about, but again, is not used, which we created in the late 70s, called the neutron bomb, which was all radiation and almost no blast. This thing, blast-wise, I mean, there are IEDs out there that are 10 times what this thing did in terms of blast. but the radiation it released was far worse than a whole series of neutron bombs. So that one mistake, I hate to say it, that one mistake cost them. In fact, there was a great quote actually before Gorbachev died in 2006, and I knew this when I was watching it. In fact, it was really, really cool for me because I was watching this and the logistics, just the cleanup and all the money they spent trying to get, remember, even now, they didn't solve it. They just put a big dome around it. It's still there. Just the logistics and the money and the manpower, it was just a black hole of funds because everything you used had to be discarded and set out into fields, never to be touched again. I was going, you know what? I go, this right here, this is the reason why there isn't a Soviet Union anymore. And Gorbachev, at the end of the movie, there was this quote, and Gorbachev in 2006 says, just so you know, this was probably the main reason why the Soviet Union folded 5 years later, was because it cost us so much in resource-wise, we couldn't recover.
Oh, wow.
We couldn't recover from it. And so, to your point, no, I mean, if that one accident broke down an entire, the East version of the United States, just broke it down. Right. Imagine, and we've got, oh God, how many? This is something, by the way, in disaster movies, and I do have to go eventually, but I want to get this out because I'm getting tired.
Go ahead and do this. Yeah, and then I'm going to listen to some badass music after this. Good. But go ahead and get what you got to say.
Which is this, and because I wrote a survival manual a few years ago after Katrina, because there's all these people that came back from Katrina after the entire city evacuated and nobody prepped. I was going, I was going, what the hell? You guys were literally, National Guarded out of the city, and you're not going to no water, no food. So what I try to tell people is like, look, if there's a huge, massive power outage, if the grid goes down, there's something like, 30 plants just on I think it's 30. I can't remember to be sure. I'd have to look it up. 30 nuclear power plants just east of the Mississippi. Most of them are on, that's where most of the population is, east of the Mississippi. If those things melted down, and a lot of them will, if you don't have maintenance, if you let's say there was just an earthquake, like the Fukushima type thing. If even 10 of those things go critical, and all the weather moves to the east,
which we have one in Arkansas too.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, I get it. It's pennies on the dollar in terms of power versus what you're spending, but you're rolling the dice on something that's really, really, really dangerous. I mean, it's like I kind of imagine it's like lab scientists working in a biological area where, all the viruses are, where you drop a vial and that's it, everybody dies.
Yeah.
It's like, how many times can you cross the room with those vials without somebody dropping them? It's only a matter of time. So no, if I had to do it over again, I'd ban the whole thing. And just treat it. It's like, no, nuclear power. And I get it. I'm not a hippie or anything like that. And I used to laugh. It's like, no nukes, the signs. But no, nowadays, after watching Chernobyl, the series, seriously, I consider it a horror movie. The scariest horror movie I've ever watched.
And that is, show.
You'll never look at nuclear power the same way again. And this is not a propaganda movie. This is about what goes wrong and what countries will do to save face to the world. And anyway, so there you go.
All right, Mark. Well, my name is Ryan.
Hi.
I do Bad News Radio.
Cool.
It was nice to meet you. They told me they were talking to you. You did some conspiracy stuff and flat Earth stuff. And he said he's been having a conversation with you.
Oh, cool.
So I was like, let me jump on.
All right.
I'll go here. I'll have a conversation.
Sure.
I used to do this all the time when I first started my show. It's kind of gotten away from that a little bit, but I've been doing it for a couple of years.
Cool.
And I have a couple friends who are very involved in different kind of things. I have some people that even they believe in the reptilians and all that kind of thing. So I've had all kinds of people on here.
Nice.
So I was like, oh man, this would be great.
All right.
Which I don't necessarily, like I say, the flat Earth thing, not my thing, whatever. But I figured if had a say in the flat Earth thing, you probably had some things to say on some other, other issues too.
I love a lot of different conspiracies, and but I look at it from the other side of the table. I try to see it. It's like, okay, why are they doing this? It's not just everyone says, oh, conspiracies are evil, and they point at the bad men, and I try to say, no, there's something else. Usually it's done for what they consider to be the greater good. And unfortunately, the greater good isn't what you would agree with. And, it's
exactly.
And it's like, I get it. Would I do the same thing? I don't know, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you.
Well, Mark, yeah, thank you. You can call anytime.
Okay, thanks, man.
Have a good night. I'm going to play some cool music.
Okay.
Thanks for talking.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Have a good one. See ya.